Hey Tamers, Regina or Jigglypuff here, and I am here with a video for the Banlist update. It's been a long time coming, but this list I've decided to finally upload since Bandai recently released their explanations on why they hit certain cards, so this video will follow through their reasoning of it and my own personal thoughts and takes on what got hit and what I think should have gotten hit. So without further ado, here we go! Now, this is the ban list in case you haven't seen it. It is going to be effective on September 1st, so in a little under a week left or so, actually almost exactly a week from when I'm recording this, there is one new ban card that they are adding, and a new banned pair, and 9 new restricted cards that they are adding to this already extensive list. For those of you who play semi-regularly, a lot of these cards probably don't surprise you. But there were a bit of interesting choices I think that they had on here, but let's just keep going and diving into it. Now, the first initial thoughts that I had when I saw this list was, it was mostly expected, right? There was a lot of decks out there that were kind of dominating the format, so we were expecting certain cards from those decks to be hits. There are technically 1 or 2 misses in my opinion, the biggest one being why is there no Guilmon X Antibody on here, and we will get to that a little bit later. But my final thoughts on this was Bandai really hates my decks, because there was a couple of things in there that when I woke up to it, I went, oh, this actually kills a deck that I wasn't expecting it to actually get hit. But more on that once we get to that specific card. Now, we're going to go ahead and start off with the Sayo Koh. This is a tamer that did originally have a banned pairing in there, so the biggest reason is because of the memory gain whenever you are able to add effects by evolution cards. And the craziest part is that Bandai's explanation here is you activate at the start of your opponent's turn to increase your memory. So essentially what they're saying is you snatch back the opponent's turn at the start of it, and because you can repeat it in a loop, they think, hey, we're not a big fan of that, but the card pool has been getting bigger and bigger, so there are more cards that are possible with this outside of the ban restriction that we originally had, so they're just going to outright ban it. And yeah, that kind of makes sense. The biggest issue here is Rip Garudamon decks. The biggest way to DNA Evo into Garudamon was by using the Sayo Koh. However, this card is actually too good for its own archetype. I think the funniest thing about this being a banned card is that the deck that it was created for doesn't even actually have a place in the format as much as we would like to see it. Hopefully that changes a little bit more, seeing as we are getting more and more IP for other Digimon media. So maybe Garudamon has a way to come back, but Sayo Koh is kind of insane. The memory manipulation part of this is probably the most annoying part of it, because being able to pass the turn to your opponent and then taking it back almost immediately is genuinely one of the most frustrating parts of the game, right? So Bandai recognizing that and outright just banning it. I am so sorry to all of the Garudamon players out there, however many of you there are, but it was time that we had to shut this card down, honestly. So I kind of agree with that one. The big one here is the banned pair, and this is the banned pair of Sakuyamon Valderarm and then the Sakuya X Antibody and Talmon. So if you have those, if you have the Sakuya X and the Talmon, you cannot have Chaos Valderarm. And if you have been playing for whenever Valderarm got introduced into this, so BT20, you'll really understand why. So Sakuyamon decks have powerful moves that allow for evoing into a level 7 early in the game and for dominating the field. You can actually get a couple tokens out on there, and Valderarm lets you have essentially 4 checks in one turn if you get really lucky. The big reasoning for them is that the Talmon and Hera and then Sakuya's own your turn effect allow you to warp into a Valderarm relatively easy, and opponents don't really have a chance to come back from that because of Valderarm's own when Digivolving effect that shuts down on plays. So their reasoning for this is that, oh, there's not a lot of decks that can fight against this, it's harmful to deck building and gameplay, so we're just going to make sure that you cannot pair these up together. And as a Sakuyamon player, this band paired, I'm not surprised. When we were discussing this in my friend group originally, this came up multiple times. They were like, oh, Regina, what do you think is going to get hit in Sakuyamon? And I'm like, you can't hit certain parts of the deck without hurting other decks out there, so like the scrambles. But in my head, I was like, oh, you know, the thing that would make the most sense is that you can't have Valderarm in the same deck as you have Sakuya pieces, because the deck is the scariest and most powerful when it has access to Valorarm. So 100% not surprised by this. I 100% also agree with Bandai on this. Valorarm is really scary. If you have not seen a perfect game from a Sakuyamon player, it's basically they just turn 2, turn 3, are able to end the game. Valorarm does 4 checks. Sakuyamon X Antibody gave you a rush body. As long as you did a little bit of chip damage, it's basically game over, right? And you can't really stop it because there's no on plays, and then if you don't have anything in raising, it's kind of hard to stop that momentum. The fact that it also locks anything from unsuspending is also kind of annoying. So it makes the most sense to me. I think Chaosmon is actually the biggest issue here. It's a little bit of an oppressive card. Normally it's really hard to get into the level 7, but when you pair it up with the Sakuyamon engine, it is one of the scariest things to fight against. And option chaining in this deck gets a little bit out of control. You can have a turn where you go from a Talbon into your level 7, and you actually don't even really need a Recur or a plugin to really do so. All you need is access to the scrambles. So as much as it pains me to say it, yeah, this was 100% the right choice. Now we're moving on to Gravity Crush. Gravity Crush is a 0 cost option that says main, gain 2 memory, and at the end of the turn, lose 2 memory. So Bandai's reasoning for this, it was used in red decks that have greater attack capabilities, looking at you, Digimon for the most part, so it's possible to win a game at quicker speeds than anticipated. As a result, the gap between attacker decks that can use this card and decks that can't use it has widened, especially with the advent of dual-colored cards. It really found a place again, and then we're getting into triple colored cards more consistently now and more often. So I think their idea of hitting this to 1 is really a good idea. The 0 cost for free memory. Sure, the -2 memory is sort of a negative, but it's not that bad. I don't think anybody was surprised by this when we were talking about the Banlist restriction announcement thing when Bandai first originally said, hey, keep an eye out on this date because we're going to be announcing this. Gravity Crush was, I think, at the top of everybody's list. It was one of those cards where a 0 cost for basically free is kind of insane. We've already hit Hammer Spark. We're moving on to Gravity Crush. So, and we hit Blinding Ray, right? It's just a matter of time. And honestly, BT1 was an entirely different game. For any of you who are lucky enough to play the Elysion demo, you'll realize that when you're playing those decks, Digimon was a little bit slower back then. Barring like the Elysion cards that they introduced into the beta, a lot of the cards from BT 1 through 3 were a very much slower game. We didn't have a lot of crazy effects that we do now for the game. So Gravity Crush was actually a little bit of a negative for the end of turn lose 2 memory. It's not as bad as it is now because of a lot of different effects that we have access to, but back when BT1 and when Digimon was first starting out, it was an okay card, especially the fact that it didn't have a security effect. Could you imagine if it had a security effect? So this is basically a game ender or pretty much close to it. There are times where you can't defeat your opponent when you have 3 Gravity Crushes, but you set them back so much that even all that extra memory doesn't really do much for them. The crazy part here is that when you see somebody start chaining Gravity Crushes, I think your mindset is, oh, I just lose this game now because there's no other reason for them to do so. Either that or you're just coping really hard and hoping, oh yeah, I'm going to get 6 memory and hopefully I can do something at the end of their turn. But the next one on here, actually, speaking of 0 cost options, is going to be Parabolic Junk. This one is actually a little bit later in Digimon, so this is a BT6 card, and this is a main one of your Digimon gains on deletion, gain 2 memory until the end of your opponent's next turn. It is also 0 cost and can gain memory regardless of the opponent's status, limiting designs for future cards. So I really think it's interesting that Bandai has a lot of, oh, this limits design for future cards, and I think it's a reasonable explanation, but it's always just really funny to me. Parabolic Junk being another 0 cost option that gains you free memory essentially is probably the biggest reason why it got hit. But the fact that it also has a security effect is kind of funny because you're just giving somebody a free option into their hand. Now, my own thoughts on Parabolic Junk is, again, early Digimon is super different than now. BT6 doesn't feel like early Digimon because it's past BT 4 and 5. However, I think the shift really started happening once we added I genuinely think it was actually BT7 when we got the hybrids and the tamers and less interaction with there. And once we started hitting that point of the game, I think that's when we started accelerating into not quite a power creep, but a bit of a different style of card game. So I actually think Parabolic Junk is part of that era of Digimon where we are a lot more different than we are now. Part of it also seems semi-preemptive. In my mindset was a lot of CS stuff is using black archetype cards. There's also Paramedimon stuff, but the new BT23 stuff that they introduced, where it's at the end of your turn you delete a Digimon that you play out. If you use this with that, if you use this option with those cards, there's a potential that you can just keep your turn, which is the same reasoning why they banned Sayo Koh. The other big ones, Guilmon and Growlmon. So this is their explanation for Guilmon, originally used for Garudamon decks for recovery in late games, but because of the larger card pool, it's possible to set up successful attacks with Rush early in the game. So in their mindset, the consequence of this is that there are faster game speeds now, and it also limits future game design. And what's interesting is if you watch one of the matches from the Grand Asia Open, there is a match, I don't remember if it was in Top Cut or not, where I think it was the Leviamon player was using a Cerberus package, and their Cerberus package let them loop a Guilmon, and it was just absolutely wild to watch. For the Growlmon, their reasoning is because it has Growlmon and its inherited effect has security +1, the abilities of Garudamon decks are greater than they anticipated, so they need to shut this card down to kind of scale back Garudamon decks. It has been a while since I've played against the Garudamon deck, but I can assure you they are still just as scary and still just as, oh, I'm going to do like 3 checks in one swing. My own personal thoughts, I genuinely hate Guilmon decks. Shout out to my friend who plays Guilmon decks, you know who you are. I have always found them, after a certain point, I think Bandai actually overtuned Garudamon. When Garudamon cards first started coming out, they were very much not as powerful as other Royal Knight cards, as other protagonist decks, and then they just started overtuning it, and it was just absolutely ridiculous. Guilmon X Antibody is probably one of my nightmare decks to play against. It's just so much. And the Rush one was expected. I think it was also pretty high up on there with a lot of people's lists, alongside Gravity Crush. The purple aspect of Guilmon's side, so the Chaos Garudamon and Megidramon sides, really utilized this, and once people started figuring out, oh, you don't actually need the Megidramon part to make Guilmon really busted, that's when it kind of got out of hand, right? This Growlmon, I think, did take people a little bit by surprise. Its on deletion is less important. I think we were expecting different parts of Growlmon to get hit, but I am not a seasoned Garudamon player, so I cannot speak to it as much. I just know that when I saw this Growlmon, I was expecting another part of its name to show up as being hit. Now, Garudamon X was also on the restriction list. They are saying one copy of this card has an effect that gives Rush and an effect that trashes, making it very potent for reducing the opponent's security stack with Phoenix X Antibody decks. With the card pool, these effects can be easily activated in one turn, allowing one copy of this card to excel at their game speed. So they're saying, hey, we're just going to have to keep it at 1 because it's still powerful at 1. If you have it at 4 of, it's going to be absolutely insane. If you have not yet run into Garudamon X Antibody, it's on play. When Digivolving, you return a red card from your trash to your hand, which is the most important part. If you have it on top of a Garuda or it has X Antibody in its sources, you can delete an opponent's Digimon whose DP is equal to or less than Garudamon X, which is generally 8k. I don't think it actually stacks. And then on your turn, when a red card returns from your trash to your hand, one of your Digimon gains Rush for the turn. It's just a red card. So, with Digimon decks, that's kind of scary. Now, Garudamon X is the one I am most upset about. I am probably super irrationally angry about this one. When I woke up and saw it, I was on call with people, and I was expecting Sakuyamon stuff to get hit. When I saw the Garuda X on there, it was just really upsetting because the bird deck is paying for the sins of other decks. I love my bird deck. I love Sora. I love Biyomon. If you've seen my my bird profile video, like, I genuinely, Sora is like one of my favorite Digidestin, and so I was really happy to be able to play Phoenix X and play the deck at a semi-competitive potential. The fact that this got hit makes me so stinking upset. It's really, I hate using the word stupid, but it's so silly and stupid, and it's so frustrating to see that this deck is getting hit for other decks. And it is the correct card to hit, and I can admit that, because the fact that it's any red card from your trash and just a Digimon gets Rush is probably what makes it super broken. And I think if they had maybe just said, oh, if they had kept it in line with the rest of the bird deck, where it was like, oh yeah, it's a bird, avian, etc., that gains the rush, or that like when you return a red Digimon card that has Bird, Avian, etc. in its traits, then I think maybe it doesn't get hit or it doesn't get used as much. I know that Megidramon or Megibirds at this point, right, was using this as the top end because they're using the Guilmon like lower half and then the Phoenixmon top end. So it might not have been that way, but for me, this is such a I'm taking it so personally. Like genuinely, it's so upsetting. I was really sad about this one. This is actually the one that I'm the most upset about on the ban list. Following up on Bandai hating my decks and hitting all my cards, Evo Plug In. Digivolution Plug In S. I love this card. I can speak forever about this card. This card doesn't care about color as long as you have a Tamer in play, and then it has a draw 1 activation, and then you can Evo into a Digimon card for a cost of 3 or less without paying the cost. Because the card pool has been increasing, it's now easy to make moves that can immediately digivolve from a low level to a level 7 card. Among these, this card's draw 1 has made the consistency greater than originally intended. Draw power is good. As with the Sakuyamon, this limits card design options for future level 7 cards that can digivolve from yellow cards, so they're deciding to hit it. Yeah, the draw part has always been really good. I have had many times where I will just play this just to get an extra draw off of this specific plugin, and then the Viximon from EX2, which lets you draw if you are using an option card that's cost 2 or more. This card has always been cracked. I love this card. This card has always been one of my favorites ever since EX2 came out, and I've consistently been building Sakuyamon decks. I like to try to keep them as tribal as possible since we've been adding more and more Sakuyamon decks, but I have always kept this as like a 4 of in almost all of my Sakuyamon decks. I think this card was absolutely insane when it came out. I love this card. I've never stopped believing that it was good. It is 100% the correct card to hit. I know a lot of... I personally did not want it to get hit, and I keep protesting it. I personally did know that it is a very good card and that it should get hit. The draw power is wild. The security effect is really good. It's a search and then you add it to your hand. Like, there are so many crazy things you can do with this. But my other expectation of this is because they're hitting this card, I'm expecting Amethyst Mandala, which is the advanced starter deck for Sakuyamon, to probably have a lot of crazy things that would make hitting this card even more justifiable. Again, because I've played Sakuya for a very long time, it is actually ridiculous that you can go from a 4 to a 7 essentially in one turn as long as you have at least one copy of this card. When I do searches with either a Rico or a Renamon or anything that lets me search for plugins, the anticipation on mine and my opponent's face when they know that I'm just missing that one piece and we see that green card, it is very palpable. So yeah, I'm upset because I love my Sakuyamon deck, but yeah, it's really powerful. And speaking of, the BT19 Sakuyamon was also hit. This one is a draw 2 when digivolving, and then you can use a single color option card of the cost of 5 or less from your hand without paying the cost. When you use this option card, you are able to make a blocker, which is kind of neat. That's not the important part for Bandai though. For Bandai, the draw 2 in the evolution was kind of crazy, but the consistency of going into a level 7 was also a problem for them. So when you're pairing this up with the Digivolution plugin that we were just looking at, it limits a lot of the designs that you can do because, again, chaining the options to go into a level 7 makes this deck semi-oppressive and in the right circumstances hyper-aggressive. So the fact that they're hitting it to 1 makes a lot of sense. I personally have not been running updated versions of Sakuyamon, so I was still only running this as 2 of in my deck because I also really like the other Sakuyamon that's barrier and minus 6000 DP. However, this card was so strong in previews. So when they were previewing it, I remember reading it and we were all like, what do you mean you just draw 2? Like, that's wild. And I wasn't a super huge believer because I really love DP reduction because it's very difficult to protect against it for a lot of stuff. But man, when this got dropped in like preview season for BT 1920 and stuff, I just remember like the chats were just, oh my god guys, it's draw 2 just when evoing. That's like 3 cards in your hand. You draw for evolution, you draw 2, and then you use a free option. And it was like, oh yeah, this is actually kind of insane, especially once they added Sakuyamon X Antibody. It was like, oh no, this deck has the potential to be absolutely wild. The freeish body is okay and kind of nice. I don't know how consistently people were able to get the blockers on the field because you usually go from Sakuyamon to Sakuya X in the same turn or in that same evolution cycle, so you don't actually get the blocker from it. And I will insist on this like I always do. Draw power is good. Whenever you have something that lets you draw outside of like your usual intended cards for evolution, it is absolutely insane. No, we should not bring back Mirage because Mirage is super oppressive. However, it did punish a lot of built-in, now built-in mechanics that they're adding to Digimon, right? Originally, Digivolution is your main built-in mechanic, but they're adding so many extra draw steps that drawing is good. If you are, if you're a Magic player and you're playing blue, you understand what I mean when I say drawing cards is good. It's insane. So yeah, they did have to hit this card, and I understand that, and I'm sad about it, but it actually doesn't hurt me in the bottom line because I already have cards that I'm thinking about replacing it. And like I said, I was personally only ever running 2 of it. I was using Kurova's original list from Worlds, and I hadn't really changed it as much because I didn't feel like the need to change it, and there wasn't a lot that I really wanted to mess around with it. So there are some really funny Sakuyamon lists out there, I will say that. But we're gonna go on to Purge of the, Royal Knights of the Purge. I just call it Purge. So Bandai's reasoning this is a little bit long. When they're saying this and Royal Knights with powerful non-on-play effects are combined, the win rate for Royal Knights is a little bit greater than expected. So it limits their design options for Royal Knight cards specifically because now you don't have to worry about the on-plays. A lot of Royal Knights will have one attackings, one digivolving, stuff like that. Their on-plays are less insane than their one attacking effects. I'm looking at you, Guilmon. Why are you always the problem child? But in addition, even though Royal Knight decks that normally have trouble with beatdown decks, so decks that can basically chunk down their security really fast, which against a deck like Royal Knights is a little bit of a problem because they have high cost cards, then the affinity has been reversed with the return of security effects. So one copy of this card has a great impact still because you can put it in your, you can just put it in your battle area. It is a very interesting way that they're explaining this, so it's a little bit confusing, but essentially it boils down to, hey, Royal Knights that have one attacking effects or like non-on-play effects that are still very powerful are kind of an issue that Digimon gains Rush for the turn, so you can evo on top of some of those Royal Knight cards if you absolutely need to. But if you've seen it before, when you change stuff like Gonku and Jesmon, you're able to spit out like bodies on the board, and then you're able to actually delete a lot of your opponent's side of the field. So their mindset is, if we want to add in more Royal Knight stuff and consistently add Royal Knights, which honestly, if I was Bandai, I would want to too, because Royal Knights are a huge part of Digimon lore and a very easy kind of archetype to build. The day we don't have a good Omnimon is going to be really surprising because I think every Omnimon so far has just been absolutely insane. I love Omnimon. Royal Knights of the Purge absolutely should have gotten hit, and this was a correct choice on their side. So Royal Purge, Royal Knights, we kind of expected it. Some Royal Knights players I know were just like, oh, that's probably the most likely card to get hit. I actually don't think it's as insane of a hit as intended though, because they have a lot of ways to get around it now. Again, you can change certain Royal Knight effects, so like Gonku, Jesmon. Again, it's been a while since I've played against Royal Knights because my locals, we've been sort of taking a step back on like crazy meta decks and just playing around with some really silly decks. The Rush is semi-important, but again, that's for when attacking effects. Again, Garudamon. So in this aspect and in this case, right, the Royal Knights of the Purge getting hit was expected. However, I don't think it's as impactful as people are probably expecting it to be, given the fact that Royal Knights has other avenues of being good, especially with the new Cool Boy and Omekamon stuff, and the fact that Liberators is potentially leaning into Cool Boy aspect of Royal Knight, as that is his partner Digimon inside the Liberator webtoon. Also, this is an addendum and a side note. If you have not yet read the webtoon for Digimon Liberators, please do so. It's so good. Alright, I'm not surprised. Metalgarurumon, I'm just calling it Melga. It's just a little bit easier. It's colloquial for a lot of stuff, and this is Bandai's reasoning for hitting the EX1 card. EX1. I cannot believe we're still looking at cards from this set. With the increase of the card pool, this is from a long time ago. We are on EX10 soon. It's crazy. This one Digivolution effect can be used repeatedly in a single turn, making it easier to gain a lot of Marie. So remember that draw power that I was talking about? Yeah, it's really, really good for Melga. And the when attacking is fine. It's the when digivolving that lets you steal back turns that's kind of annoying, right? So as a result, the potential designs of future Garurumon cards would be greatly narrowed, and so they're hitting it to 1. Now, here's the crazy thing about Melga. It's just missing a level 2 to hit from the whole Gabumon line. I think we've hit almost every single thing from Gabumon except like a level 7 and a level 2. We've even hit the Tamer. But I will say I appreciate that Bandai is hitting this ahead of time, because Omnidecks can get out of control with the Metalgarurumon stuff. It's just really easy to loop into it. If you have not yet seen an Omni loop deck with the Metalgarurumon stuff, go ahead and take a look at that. It's kind of insane to see it. I do appreciate this. I think it's just really funny that Metalgarurumon is just apparently just a Digimon line that they cannot stop designing out of control. I personally think it was a problem when it first came out, and I'm so happy it's finally being addressed. Those of you who played during like peak Melga like deck season, that would be with the promo worker stuff where you would just loop the deck out. This card has always been sort of a problem, and it's interesting to see that it's taken this long to finally address it. I'm not sad to see it go. Every time a new Metalgarurumon or a new Garudamon card or anything for Gabumon comes out, I love Gabumon's design. I adore Gabumon. I loved Matt when I was like a kid and watching Digimon. I genuinely think they are some of the scariest designs in Digimon to come out. So, I love dogs. Don't like this dog. And that's actually kind of it. So my final thoughts on this is it's actually a pretty decent ban list, right? There are some cards that overall should have been addressed, and I'm kind of happy with how it overall came out. Am I sad that they gutted Sakuyamon and that they hit birds? Yes, but were they problem decks? Yeah, absolutely. Bandai has shown that they're actually pretty good at assessing the strength of the format. Bandai has generally been like, okay, we don't really care that this card is coming out. We know that it's a problem, so we want to make sure that the gameplay is a little bit more fun for everybody involved. The biggest one of this one is when BT7 was originally coming out, they hit Mega Digimon Fusion and just straight up banned it. And that was because Susanoo-mon was a problem in Japan at that time, and they didn't want us to suffer through it, and I thank them every day for that. But I really appreciate that Bandai overall does keep a pulse on the circuit for competitive play, and I generally think that they do a pretty good job of assessing it. I wish that they didn't have to assess it because of game design, but I think at that point, right, when you're in this game for almost, 5 years now that this game has been out, it gets harder and harder to, I guess, balance it as your card pool gets more and more expansive, and people out there are really creative and can come up with really good ideas for decks. So I think they're doing the best they can, and I don't really have complaints. The impact for the meta, I don't know how crazy. Well, no, Sakuyamon was still going to be a problem, I think. We are probably locking it away for the next 2 months, and then when Amethyst Mandala previews happen, and then when the deck actually comes out, we'll see how crazy it is. I like that they are slowly trying to neuter the Megidramon stuff and the Guilmon stuff. I do wish they went a little bit further with it. I think Guilmon decks are still kind of a sleeper in some aspects and really do deserve a little bit more hits. And actually, on that note, my final thoughts for this one also involve the fact that Guilmon X Antibody wasn't hit. I don't like this card. I think this card is really silly. You draw one, trash one, that's cool, but if it's Guilmon or X Antibody in its cards, then until your opponent's turn, it gains on deletion. You can play a Guilmon in its name from your trash without paying the cost, and it has an inherit of opponent's Digimon or deleted gain of memory. I think this card is ridiculous. I was talking to the same friend who does play Guilmon decks, and his reasoning was we don't really, like, we as in like Guilmon players don't really need the Guilmon X Antibody, so if they had hit that, it would have been like whatever. There are other Guilmons that I think that they should have hit as well, but I think the biggest miss for a lot of people was Guilmon X Antibody here. The other question is if Tropical Venom, which is the last remaining zero cost option from that era, I'm pretty sure, if it's going to get hit next. It has one of your opponent's Digimon gains on deletion, lose 2 memory until the end of their next turn. So the opposite of Parabolic Junk, which is your Digimon, but Tropical Venom is you infect essentially one of your opponent's Digimon. It's really interesting because I have a lot of personal thoughts about green decks. I think green decks have been sort of chopped off at the knee ever since they introduced Digisorption and ever since they introduced Hidden Potential Discovered, because green decks can't be super powerful from the get-go, because if they are, then Hidden Potential Discovered is just sort of insane for them. Will that change when Zafagamon stuff comes out, because Zafagamon is the primary protagonist that we are focusing on right now? Maybe. We are looking at, when you're looking at Time Stranger as well, which is also confirmed to get a set for Digimon, right? A lot of the characters in there are looking to be not green, so it's probably not as big of a problem for those decks. However, I think it's just a matter of time before Tropical Venom gets hit. Someone out there is going to make it a problem, and then we're going to have to address that. And then Sakuyamon again is having Amethyst Mandala, which is his advanced structure deck coming out in December. It's already been confirmed to have new option cards as well, so new plugins. And maybe they were smart to, hit Digivolution Plug In because of the starter deck coming out. Who knows? We're going to find out when preview season starts for it and when it comes out in December. The other thing I forgot to put on this list was the Cerberusmon and Cerberus X package. I cannot believe that specific purple dog has gotten away without getting hit again. I'm not talking about the werewolf mode loop that we had before. I'm talking about Cerberusmon and Cerberusmon X as a whole now, because it does basically the same thing as Garuda X. I get that it's like the red half of everything, and so you want to chain it with Phoenixmon, but the fact that the other side of those colors, the purple side, hasn't gotten touched is actually kind of irksome. I'm hoping that at some point Bandai fixes that, but who knows? Maybe it's going to take another Leviamon or another like purple red or purple something to make Cerberusmon enough of a problem that Bandai addresses it. But that's about it, honestly. I don't really think there was a lot of surprises for people on this list, but how did you guys feel about it? How are you guys going to fix your decks? Were you even impacted by it at all? As you can tell, I have to go make some edits to some decks within the week, or else I'm going to be in trouble of cheating on accident. But yeah, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Did you think that we needed to add more cards onto that ban list? Do you think that Digivolution Plug In should not have been hit, or Garudamon X Antibody? Because I certainly don't. But regardless, thank you for checking out this video. Thank you for listening to my rants, and hopefully you'll have a wonderful day. Hopefully you mourn your decks if you got hit like I will be doing. And that's about all I got for you guys. So, yeah, happy ban list announcement explanation day, everybody. Goodbye.